Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The U.S. conducted another strike against a boat in the Pacific, killing 2 people. The U.S. Southern Command announced the strike on social media and did not provide any evidence of alleged drug smuggling. Since September, the Pentagon's claimed 30 attacks on boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, killing at least 107 people. This comes as the Trump administration's built up military forces in the region as part of a pressure campaign against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Meanwhile, U.S. officials say the CIA carried out a drone strike on a port facility in Venezuela last week. It's the first report of a U.S. attack on a target inside Venezuela. CNN reports the strike targeted a remote dock on the Venezuelan coast that the U.S. government claims is being used for narco-trafficking. President Trump revealed the strike last week and, when questioned, repeated it Monday without providing any evidence of drug smuggling.
There was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs, so we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. It's the implementation area. That's where they implement, and that is no longer around.
President Trump was speaking next to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump expressed support for Israel's threats to launch new attacks on Iran. Trump's remarks came as he hosted Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago. It was the 5th visit by the Israeli leader to the U.S. since Trump retook the White House. Responding to Netanyahu's claims that Iran's rebuilding its nuclear industries following U.S. and Israeli attacks last summer, Trump said, quote, "We'll knock the hell out of them," unquote. Separately, Trump warned Hamas will, quote, "have hell to pay" if it refuses to disarm during the upcoming second stage of the U.S.-brokered ceasefire agreement.
Well, we talked about Hamas and we talked about disarmament, and they're going to be given a very short period of time to disarm, and we'll see how that works out. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will be in charge of that from our side, but if they don't disarm as they agreed to do, they agreed to it, and then there'll be hell to pay for them.
Trump made no reference to the hundreds of times Israel's violated the ceasefire since it took effect October 10th. Trump also claimed he'd recently spoken to the Israeli President Isaac Herzog about a pardon for Netanyahu, who faces charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in 3 separate cases in Israel. President Trump said Herzog promised a pardon is, quote, "on its way," though Herzog's office later denied the claim. Meanwhile, Netanyahu announced President Trump will become the first non-Israeli citizen to receive the Israel Prize, the nation's highest civilian award. The announcement came as President Trump was caught on a hot mic complaining to Netanyahu that he'd been denied a Nobel Peace Prize. We'll have more on this story after headlines. Hamas has officially confirmed its longtime spokesman, Abu Obaida, and former leader in Gaza, Mohammed Sinwar, were killed earlier this year, confirming Israel's announcement. Back in May, the Israeli military said it had killed Mohammed Sinwar, the younger brother of the former Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar. 3 months later, Israel said Abu Obaida had also been killed. In a video statement, a new Hamas spokesperson appeared on camera masked and announced the group remains committed to the October 10th ceasefire, but, quote, "will not give up their weapons as long as the occupation remains," unquote. Since the U.S.-brokered ceasefire took effect, Israel's killed at least 414 Palestinians, wounding more than 1,100. Somalia has condemned Israel's recognition of the breakaway region of Somaliland, calling it a, quote, "direct and grave threat to international peace and security," unquote, in a letter to the United Nations Security Council. The letter also says, quote, "we further note with deep concern reports that this recognition may serve as a pretext for the forced relocation of Palestinians to northwestern Somalia," unquote. Last week, Israel became the first country in the world to recognize Somaliland as an independent state. Meanwhile, other countries refuse to recognize Somaliland. The Arab League's UN ambassador told the Security Council it's rejecting, quote, any measures arising from this illegitimate recognition aimed at facilitating forced displacement of the Palestinian people or exploiting northern Somali ports to establish military bases, unquote. In Somalia, demonstrations against Israel's recognition of Somaliland spread across the country as protesters waved flags and called for national unity. In Iran, protests erupted Monday over the country's falling currency and dire economic situation. Merchants and shopkeepers near Tehran's Grand Bazaar closed their businesses and joined demonstrations. Footage posted on social media showed demonstrators chanting Azadi, the Farsi word for freedom. Another video shows security forces in riot gear confronting the protesters and firing tear gas. Since Iran's 12-day war with Israel back in June, Iran's currency has lost 60% of its value. On Monday, the head of Iran's central bank resigned as protests spread throughout Iran. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered his army to take full control of the Zaporizhzhia region of southern Ukraine after a Russian commander said his forces were less than 10 miles from its capital city. Putin's order came as the Kremlin accused Ukraine of launching a drone attack on one of Putin's presidential residences. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected the claim, calling it, quote, a complete fabrication intended to justify additional attacks against Ukraine, unquote. Meanwhile, many residents of Kyiv remain deeply skeptical that President Trump's discussions with Putin, Zelensky, and European powers would bring Russia's war on Ukraine any closer to an end.
We see our enemy. We know that talks don't stop him. Only real strength can stop him. Our soldiers now provide this strength, so it is unlikely that these talks will stop the war.
China launched large-scale military drills around Taiwan for a second day Tuesday. Taiwan says it detected 130 Chinese aircraft and 22 vessels near the island. It's the highest number recorded on any day over the past year, according to an analysis by the South China Morning Post. Beijing called the deployment of forces a, quote, stern warning, following the U.S. sending an $11 billion arms package to Taiwan. In Kosovo, the Albanian Nationalist Party of Albin Kurti has won a landslide victory in snap parliamentary elections held Sunday. Kurti has called for an expansion of social services and higher salaries for public workers. His party's victory breaks a 9-month political deadlock that's been in place since inconclusive elections in February left Kosovo without a functioning government. Voters in the capital, Pristina, were hopeful Sunday's election marks a turning point.
No one living in Kosovo, nor those from the diaspora, have been satisfied with the political blockade that existed. And perhaps eventually there will be positive results and the political parties will be forced to find a solution, because this is holding the country back.
In economic news, new data shows U.S. corporate bankruptcies surged this year to levels not seen since 2010. At least 717 companies filed for bankruptcy through November, a 14% increase over last year. This comes as a new poll commissioned by The Guardian found nearly half of U.S. residents say their financial security is getting worse, compared to just 1 in 5 who say it's improving. 57% believe the U.S. economy is currently in a recession. Meanwhile, President Trump's continuing to blame Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell for the state of the U.S. economy. On Monday, Trump called Powell a fool and said, "I'd love to fire him." A federal judge in California has dismissed an indictment against a TikTok streamer from South Los Angeles who was shot by ICE agents who surrounded his car during an immigration enforcement operation in October. Carlitos Ricardo Parias had faced charges of assault after agents accused him of using his car as a weapon to ram 2 of their vehicles. But newly released body cam footage from the ICE agent who fired his gun shows Parias did not move his car. Instead, the footage shows the agent smashing through a passenger window, pointing his gun at Parias and threatening to shoot him if he didn't get out. The agent then fires, striking Parias in the elbow. A deputy marshal was struck in the hand when the bullet ricocheted. On Saturday, U.S. District Judge Fernando Alguin ordered the case against Parias dismissed, saying he was deprived of his constitutional rights when the government moved him to an ICE processing center 90 miles east of Los Angeles following his release on bond. The Trump administration is set to use a public health regulation drafted during the early days of the COVID pandemic to deny immigrants access to asylum. The regulation taking effect Wednesday will allow the U.S. to deny asylum claims at U.S. ports of entry based on, quote, emergency public health concerns generated by a communicable disease, unquote. This comes on top of a broad asylum ban Trump imposed on his first day back in office, despite U.S. obligations under international law to provide pathways for resettlement or asylum to those fleeing persecution. And Bangladesh has declared 3 days of state mourning after the nation's first female prime minister, Khaledia Zia, died in the capital, Dhaka. She was 80 years old, longtime leader of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and served 3 terms as prime minister. Bangladesh's interim leader, Muhammad Yunus, wrote on social media, quote, "Through her uncompromising leadership, the nation was repeatedly freed from undemocratic conditions and inspired to regain liberty. The nation will remember her contributions to the country and its people with respect," he said. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.